Hello and welcome to the first audio and video dev blog for Atomic Society. For those who don't know, Atomic Society is a post-apocalyptic town-building game with a heavy focus on setting laws and punishments and in controlling a wild population in a dangerous wasteland. It's our first ever indie game, but has already earned thousands of players. I've been writing open and honest and very personal dev blogs about it for a long time now, which you can find on our website. For some reason, the idea occurred to me to start recording them too and share them on YouTube. If you want more information on the game, please check out the links in the description. The gameplay footage you're seeing during this video is me playing the latest version of Atomic Society. I'm going to try and do a complete playthrough and we'll see how far I get through before we release another version. This blog is a few weeks overdue because we've been busy finishing the latest and possibly biggest update to the game so far. Version 0.09 is the final big update we're going to release before coming to Steam later this year. After several months of hard work, update 0.09 is now available for our pre-alpha players to try out. This update brings several new features, including hostile outsiders to make or break deals with, 4 new buildings to construct, custom difficulty mode, story elements, town leader upgrades, and numerous other improvements. Pre-alpha players can download the new version by finding the email from Humble, which would have arrived when you purchased the game. New players will access the latest features as soon as they buy the game. Full patch notes for the version are available in the description for those who want to read them. Right now, we're taking a few well-earned days off to recover our strength, writing devlogs aside, and then it's back to work turning this pre-alpha into an alpha. My thoughts on making version 0.09. The game has a life of its own nowadays. There's so much code in Atomic Society, and so many gameplay elements rubbing up against each other, that the game pretty much tells us what we should add to it next. It's not a blank canvas for ideas anymore. If we want to add anything to it now, it has to fit in with so much that already exists. The invention stage is gradually coming to an end. Now we're entering the long improving phase. Definitely feels like we're working on a downward slope, which is great after wandering in the wilderness for years, with so much to create and only hope and a few strong ideas to keep us going. I can actually see the end of the project now when I play the game. It's just a case of filling in some rather large gaps and applying a whole heap of polish. I do think that by summer 2019, or 12 months from now, Atomic Society could be at the point where we say, yep, we're done. That doesn't mean we're going to stop there. There's still tons I'd love to do with the game if it's financially possible. I have pages and pages of ideas of things to add to this game, but there's only so much you can do. I think from now on, it's going to be more and more a case of improving what already exists, rather than inventing completely new gameplay systems. For years we've been swimming in an ocean of ideas. Finally, I see the way forward. We can finish this. That's quite a comfort, because there's a short time during every version where I think, making games sucks. It's a feeling that comes upon me when things are taking massively longer than I predicted, when the new features are half finished and unbalanced, so the game isn't fun, when sales and media coverage are relatively slow, and when the team is busy with their own tasks, or real life troubles, and there isn't that social aspect to making a game. And then, about 10 days or so before release, the whole thing comes together, and I can actually play the game like a player, and not a frustrated developer. Then my motivation becomes sky high, and I want to make games for the rest of my life, and I truly love what Atomic Society is becoming. I become a cheerleader for the game all over again. The team is happy, and I think Atomic Society could actually pay a salary one day. This pumps me up so much that I'm desperate to start on the next version. Whatever happens, there's light at the end of the tunnel now. We're going to have a computer game out of this crazy project, plus some new friendships and supporters. More importantly, we can spend the remaining time making the game more fun, instead of having to invent that fun out of nothing. I guess the only analogy my frazzled brain can think of right now is moving house. We have finally moved in most of the boxes. Now we get to unpack and make the rooms feel like home. Or maybe it's way too hot in the UK this week and I just need to move on. Making the final features for 009. It's been a while between blogs, so there's a few features that slipped into 009 which I haven't discussed here before. You have to be pretty careful what you put into the game near version release, as testing takes ages, but we had some negative feedback on the game, and nothing makes you want to work harder than fixing something people dislike. I love getting well-written, polite, intelligent feedback, even if it's negative. Perhaps I don't love it at the time all that much, but afterwards it always makes the game better, and as I don't have a private army of user testers to get feedback from in my own home, I rely on the public. Here's some of the things we managed to squeeze into the last version. Custom difficulty. Based on feedback, we made the custom difficulty feature a priority, which is now in the game. This lets you make the game ridiculously easy or impossibly difficult to suit your taste. You can now start a game completely on your own, without any citizens for that Omega Man vibe, or start with 49 trained engineers instead, if you like building things really quickly. You can also make it so the migrants who come to your town drop dead instantly, or make them as well fed and rested as pampered VIPs. My theory is that you know how hard you want the game to be better than I do, and if you don't like any of our balanced presets, there's now an alternative. Story elements. Because context is important and words are cheap to produce, we also added in a few story elements to this version, which should help explain things like why you start the game standing in a field with a bunch of strangers. If you play the game, you'll find out. This is the closest our budget will ever get to cutscenes. You can totally ignore these story elements, or read them if you want to get immersed into the game's world. Adding story elements forced me to write fiction, which thousands of people will experience. This was pretty daunting, as I've never knowingly had so many people read my words, or in this case, listen to them. However, it was also enjoyable. I'm a writer at heart, and coming up with post-apocalyptic fiction is a pleasure to someone like me. Enforcer Outposts. We don't usually dare throw in a new building to the game right at the end of a version, as it can generate a lot of bugs, but this one was an exception. The Enforcer Outpost is essentially a stripped-down town hall. It acts like a mini police station, which lets us keep the existing town hall building as something unique and special. We had plans for doing this eventually, but hearing someone in a YouTube video talk about it made us push the feature forward. I do still watch every single YouTube video about the game, by the way, even the ones in Spanish or German, and yes, I still feel horribly anxious while doing so. Bugs are getting nasty. The longer we make the game, the harder the bugs become to squash. Finding them isn't too difficult, but getting them to repeat on command, which lets us see if they are truly fixed, is becoming harder and harder. I tested this version to the point of exhaustion, but as soon as the public got their hands on it last week, serious bug reports from players started to arrive. It's pretty disheartening. We always fix the most obvious bugs, but there's still dozens of cryptic ones lurking in the code. For example, we really struggled with a bug in this version, where someone died in the old people's home. This caused the entire town to die of diarrhea. The only comfort I can take from this is that at least our bugs are sometimes amusing. We thought we'd fix this bug, of course, but we couldn't be sure, because it's impossible to repeat on demand, and it turns out, now we've released the game, it still happens in a modified and rare manner. So if you are playing the pre-alpha, please make multiple and frequent saves, for your own sake. However, even when we fixed these big bugs, we just discovered they were concealing hundreds of small ones. When the game was an early pre-alpha, we could ignore certain bugs, but I think we are beyond that point now. The public's tolerance for bugs drops with each version because we become more mainstream. Unfortunately, fixing bugs takes time that could be spent making new features, so I have a decision to make. It would be really nice if there was enough content in the game to keep people busy so we could devote ourselves to fixing bugs, but there isn't, so we have to go on making content and hope the bugs aren't too severe. This brings me on to the last pre-alpha version. Well, despite what I just said about bug fixing, we still have to squeeze in some new content into the next version. We can't help ourselves, even if it ends up a little bit buggy. In fact, Adam has already started work on the first new features for 0010. First up, the breeding system. At long last, citizens will start having sex with each other. This is going to be quite a shake-up to the game, which until now has relied solely on migration to control town growth. In fact, I'm quite nervous about it. It could change the feel of the game quite dramatically. This feature has to go into the game though. We can't make a game about setting laws and moral choices if we leave out sexual topics. However, whatever we add must affect gameplay as well. And the most obvious way to do that with sex is to tie your moral choices into birth rates. If you want to grow your population in a more predictable way than through random migrants, you'll need more babies. However, that requires certain laws, and if you don't like those laws, it's going to be back to migration for you. As regards Atomic Society, we're going to skip the infant phase, because there isn't time for babies to grow up while you're playing the game. The pace of the game is too quick. It will probably be the case that older children spawn at hospitals, assuming you've built them, and we'll see how it goes from there. I'm hopeful I can balance this into something fun. Citizens shacking up with each other leads me on to 2 new social issues, which we're also going to bring into the next version. I've wanted to put them into the game for quite a while, but it's probably easier if I do it before Steam. Homosexuality and abortion. There are going to be gay men and women in the next version, and you can choose to make them welcome or condemn them. If you at least tolerate their existence, they will be happier individuals and more productive workers. However, in Atomic Society, if you encourage something, you will get more people who also share those issues coming to your town, and that could affect your birth rate. As for abortion, I've always wanted to put in really big life issues into Atomic Society, issues that other games just don't talk about, and this has to be something that players decide for themselves. If you're chasing a high birth rate and have lots of pregnant women and new mothers, it will hurt your productivity as a town, and that will affect, ultimately, how well people survive. Starting in the next version, there are going to be women who choose to abort their pregnancy. We leave the personal motivations of citizens up to you, because you can imagine them better than we can. However, I can really see some grim towns coming in the next version, and I'm quite excited about that. At the same time, I am a little anxious about adding issues like this into the game, because you know what the internet is like. But so far, the audience for Atomic Society has been really mature and quite chilled, so I think we'll get away with it. Regardless of that, it's what the game needs, so I've just got to roll with it and put it in. I'm bored of games that don't talk about serious life issues. Missing features. This doesn't apply to YouTube, but if you've been reading past devlogs, you might remember me discussing features like religion, radiation, and electricity. Rest assured, those features are still in the early stages of development. There just wasn't time to put them into 009. When the time is right to work on them again, we will do our best at finding a fun way to include them into the existing simulation. Steam draws near. After 2 years of our game only being available through our own personal website, we are finally now working on getting the Steam release ready to ship. Last week, our team met up in person, which we do from time to time, and we discussed what could be the biggest milestone in our journey as fledgling indie devs. We sketched out the new version and penciled in a possible release date. When I think this release date is achievable, trust me, I'll be making sure that everybody knows about it. For the time being, our goal is just to get on Steam within the next 3 months. In the meantime, I have to work out what to do about the special edition version of the pre-alpha. We have put a time limit on selling it, because I want to reward our earliest backers by giving them unique rewards. However, the special edition kind of sells well, and it has kept us going at times. Do I do away with it? I don't know. There is so much to do before Steam. It's going to be the craziest time of our development since Kickstarter, and we all know how that went. At least I know launching on Steam is going to be easy from a technical point of view, given the incompetent garbage that pours onto Steam every single day. However, it is still a huge thing, because it could decide whether game development becomes a job for us instead of being a hobby that sometimes pays expenses. The overly optimistic and overly negative parts of my brain are at war with each other right now, trying to predict the future. As designer, I am probably more terrified of the incoming reviews than the lack or gain of money. However, I do admit money has its uses. Whatever happens, it's not like I'm going to starve to death, but I'd love indie dev to be a more financially secure career for me so that we can make a second game. Ultimately, I haven't got a clue what is going to happen. Am I going to be kicking myself for turning down all those publishers up to now, or am I going to be dancing around the room counting money? And either way, does it matter? Anyway, that's enough rambling from me for now. Thank you for putting up with my first audio devlog. I know I've got a long way to go, but I've enjoyed doing it for the first time. And I am still incredibly proud of the new version that we've made and the work that went into it. To the point I even dared do some marketing and social media this week. I'm really looking forward to making the game bigger and more reliable over the next year. And the work is always worth it in the end, no matter what it turns out as. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next month.